Hello students, welcome again to this next video lecture. In previous video lecture we observed the physical barriers, psychological barriers. Again, what comes in the psychological barriers? These all things we have already discussed in the previous video lecture. So right now we are going to study next part in detail. That comes to the barriers to communication. Okay, so let us go on. The other thing that we will discuss in lot of details today is semantic barriers. Semantic means refer to word meanings, and word meanings depend largely on context, and communication is all about communication. It is all about sending and receiving meanings, but we know that meanings cannot be transmitted, only messages can be transmitted. So when we talk about word meanings or semantics, we are essentially talking about sending words or messages that are composed of words, and hoping that people who receive these collections of words interpret them in the same context as we want them interpreted. The first semantic barrier that we will talk about is allness, and this was a term coined some time ago, and the first semantic barrier that we will talk about is allness. And this was a term that was coined some time ago, and it refers to an attitude that people have who believe that I say about a particular subject is all there is to say or know about that subject. This means that people who have this barrier feel that they know everything about a subject, and anything else and that is said about the subject doesn't really count, and or nobody else can have as much information as they have about the subject, and they are the authorities on the subject, and so as we say, it is my way or the highway. So you either listen to what I am saying and believe what I am saying, or go and believe somebody else, and that becomes a big problem in sending our message, in communicating our thoughts and receiving messages as well. So this usually translates into superior subordinate problems. In superior subordinate communication problems, in communication among people who belong to different expert themes. So we get so involved in our work, we get so engrossed in whatever we are doing, that we are not able to see whatever we are doing from another perspective. We have been trained, we have put in so much work, we feel we have a right to collapse those experts, and then somebody comes along who has seen things from a different perspective, and we are just not able to see it. One very good example of this is the communication regarding technical issues between people who are actually technical experts and the users of whatever these technical experts design. The users see things in a very different light. Then there are researchers that evaluate or analyze or study the social impact of these new technological developments. And so when you listen to an interaction between the users, the social scientist who studies social change, a result of as a result of technology, and the designers of new technologies, we realize that everybody is coming from a different perspective, and usually the designers or the people who have spent 10, 12, 50, 20 years developing a product are just not able to grasp the social impact, and they are at times not able to grasp what a user must be feeling about the technology they developed, and how it must be impacting them. Okay, so the next, and within allness, we have two different kinds of barriers. We have levels of abstraction. Okay, the first one here is the extensional knowledge, which operates here extensional knowledge which operates on perception and uses names, statistics and descriptions from actual observation which can be verified by someone else. So this is inductive, similar to inductive reasoning, where you go from this specific to general. This is what I know, everywhere can verify it. Anyone will be able to come up with the same categories that I have been able to come up with. Hence, there is nothing else beyond whatever I am saying, that is extensional knowledge. The other one is intentional knowledge, and and this is more about the deductive logic or deductive knowledge. It involves inferences, opinions, assumptions, judgments, and generalizations, and the person here is more concerned with the verbal description of an event than with the event itself. This is what I saw, this is what I heard. Hence, I am inferring this and based on the words that I heard. This is what these words mean based on the words that were presented to me. This is what the event means, and that becomes a big barrier. We say, I have seen every aspect of whatever was presented to me. I have gone through everything that is presented to me. And if I am able to interpret things in a certain way, anyone else should, we all know that when we have large volumes of data, one small minor difference in selecting the data points can result in completely different interpretations, completely different inferences by different people. So, levels of abstraction is one kind of allness barrier. The other allness barrier is the closed mind syndromes. Closed mind syndromes, and based on from allness and refer to a person's inability to relate to another person's point of view, which means that again my way or the highway. So what I am saying is true. Why? Because I have done enough research, because I see things in a certain way, and that is all there is. So this is really a blinded vision, as we say, or since wear their blinders to make sure that they stay on track, or so they are like this. And so this is my closed minded or tunnel vision. This is all I am saying, and there is nothing beyond whatever I see. Nothing exists beyond whatever I am seeing. Okay, so another type of semantic barrier that we will discuss today is bypassing. Okay, this bypassing is the tendency to ignore the fact that the same word can have different meanings. For example, the word run can mean a person running. Now, run on a sock can mean that the sock is the socks that we wear on our feet. So, run on a sock can mean that the sock is torn in some place. When we talk about run, we also it can actually refer to a physical act of running, or somebody has had a good run with their work, or a good run of experiences, or whatever. So it can refer to a series of events and or fast diametrically opposite meanings. Fast means high speed. High speed. Fast also means when do you not eat for a day or a while. So two meanings of the same word. Or mouse, a regular mouse, and that plastic device that we use with the computer. And when we bypass, we also have a tendency to ignore the fact that different words can have the same meaning too, which means restroom and washroom and loo can mean the same thing. So we have different meanings, different words that contribute to the same meaning. Now, of course, I can understand that a restroom in reality would be a more of an lounge attached to a bathroom where you go and you freshen up, and the washroom would probably only be used for washing yourself. But then we use these terms interchangeably, and people who bypass do not want to even acknowledge that is okay to use these terms interchangeably. Okay, so another type of barrier is the tendency to evaluate or judge, and we are focusing only on meanings of words here. One is confusion of facts with the inference. What is the fact and what is an inference? Please discuss in your class and I will tell you. Okay, so the fact is something that is viewed by everybody in the same light, and inference on the other hand is a statement about the unknown made on the basis of the known. I know these three facts, based on these three facts I infer something else. So over the years, IITs have been taking an exceptional students from the country. Over the years, lamina of IIT have been performing really well in India and abroad. So I assume now, I infer from this data that all IIT students are exceptional students. All IIT students have an above average IQ. This may or may not be true, because There are some students here who work really, really hard and they succeed on the basis of their intelligence, on their hard work. Everybody works really hard. But there are some who are not that intelligent, but they work. They are not that insightful, but they work so hard that they are able to surpass the students who are not working hard but are extremely insightful and add extremely or very very capable of picking up on smaller things. So all our students have, yes, all our students are exceptional, but they are exceptional in different fields. But what do we club all of them in one slot? And that is what people say. So this is one example. So so everybody who joins an organization like Google is extremely creative. Now we do not know that for a fact. Yes, Google encourages creativity amongst its employees. Yes, Google has had a reputation for providing a very comfortable working environment for its employees. But it is possible that there are some employees in Google who may not be that creative or who may not feel that comfortable with the environment that has been provided to them. The other semantic barrier that we will talk about today is polarization. Okay, polarization. See, this is the polarization, which is either odd thinking or judging people and events in terms of black and white. For example, all employees are either efficient or inefficient, or all employees are either seriously loyal or disloyal to the organization, etc. So, if an employee is not loyal and is not constantly championing the cause of the organization, that means that the employee has tie-ups with competitor organizations. So, we just slot people into either one or two extremes of a continuum. So, either a person is good or bad. There is no middle ground, and this is called polarization. And we tend to evaluate people and we tend to use absolute words for these things: bias and prejudice. Again, we talked about this that stereotype people based on the descriptions that we receive about people. We are biased against certain types of people, so that is stereotyping. Then evaluation frozen evaluation or judgments set in concrete. For example, an employee who was found to be disloyal 5 years ago is still working against the organization, or an employee who was not able to meet the targets last month will never be able to meet the targets ever in his or her life. And so this is called a frozen evaluation, which means that the evaluation that we have about a person is frozen in time. Okay, so next is snap judgments. Snap judgments are another type of semantic barriers, and snap judgments are direct, uncontrolled, immediate responses to some circumstances, which means jumping to conclusions without thinking about them. Another semantic barrier that we will talk about is misuse of language. In this, we have various things. The first one is misuse of small talk, which means the information that we may exchange over a cup of tea or in a public place, or casual information that we exchange with appears in misinterpreted as a vital piece of information. So this kind of exchange is used by gossip mongers in the organizations. You offer here somebody is saying something. You will offer here a piece of the conversation and we will start interpreting things from it, and that can lead to a big barrier or a big problem with the way we interpret the rest of the events in the organization. Okay, so the other thing here is misuse of is not a word, is a big pen actually. When we say is we are talking in terms of an absolute terms, we are talking in terms of things being a certain way. And so A is an inefficient employee, A is very dedicated to her work, B is not a nice person, B is a very good supervisor. So you know, we create these valued judgments, we use these words inappropriately, and we create these value judgments and we tend to slot people in categories, and then all these things are interrelated. Okay, the other semantic barrier here is a misuse of the word. And what do? We club the illogically juxtapose, or we inappropriately juxtapose or place together or attach two different concepts together that really do not make any sense, and we reach different kinds of conclusions. So in this so in thus it results to the indiscriminate use of the word, and it may lead to misinterpretation regarding the existence of complex relationships where there are none. So we take two different concepts and we use the word, and just because we want to cover enough ground, and we end up misinterpreting the whole event, or we end up sending a wrong signal to the receiver of our message, who ends up misinterpreting the event. Okay, so some possible cues, some possible cures for semantic barriers. The first one is allness. So when we first barrier that we just discussed is allness, and some ways in which we can prevent this or we can get over this is by indexing whatever we come across appropriately. The other cure here is that we ask when did the event take place. So or what is our frame of reference. We index, we define the boundaries. I'm not talking about all students. I'm talking about students A, B, C, and D, and I'm talking about students A, B, C, and D from the 1972 batch, for example. Okay, so we create boundaries, we define the context. Instead of saying all students were able to make a name for themselves, we say students A, B, C, and D from 1972 batch became good entrepreneurs, or students from 1961, students B from 1963, student C from 1965, student D from 1973 ended up setting up their own entrepreneurial ventures, which led to students from 1965 and students from 1985 have joining them and diversifying these ventures. So we have indexed instead of saying all students are entrepreneurs, we say that these specific students become good entrepreneurs in these years. Then we use the word etc. Now when we are trying to be absolute or exact, we avoid the use of the word etc., which is commonly written as etc dot. It is not etc., it is etc. And so that is one, we use quotations, we classify things, we refer to things within their context. We also need to be aware of self-reflexiveness, which means we need to think about, and we need to evaluate our own assumptions and then classify whatever we are trying to say accordingly. We try and avoid labeling, we try and avoid slotting people and situations into categories. We also want to keep in mind that the word is not the actual thing, and no word can completely describe the actual thing. And why is this? There is something what we have talked about in the very beginning of this series. We talked about messages being in words. The meanings cannot be transmitted, only messages can be transmitted. Okay, the meanings are in people, the messages are in words used by the same people, but the meanings come from the people who are using those words. So I may be using a word that is inappropriate. If I use an absolute word, I may not be doing justice to the actual description of the event. Okay, so the other cure for another semantic barrier is the cure for bypassing. We talked about bypassing, which means we fail to understand what different words can mean and what meanings we can draw from, or what similar meanings we can draw from different words. So how do we deal with this? We look to people instead of words for meanings and be sensitive to the way the words are currently used by individuals. Okay? We listen, we pay attention to our environment, we pay attention to our surroundings, we pay attention to the usage of different words in our environment, and we try and figure out what is being said and how it is being said. And then we realize that maybe different words can mean different things, or differently sounding words can mean the same thing. One word can have more than one meaning, more than one connotation. Okay, I will repeat here. Hmm? One word can have more than one meaning or more than one connotation, and we keep our eyes and ears open. We see how different words are used, different meanings are interpreted. Okay, the other semantic barrier that we discussed was fact inference confusion. And to overcome this barrier, we need to avoid guessing what is going on in other people's minds. We said we assume similarities. We talked about the reasons for misinterpretations. We need to understand that we can never really figure out what other people are thinking. We can never really know what is going on in other people's minds. And we need to consciously avoid figure out or trying to figure out what is going on people's mind. We also need to trust our own interpretation of facts, and instead of blindly believing any interpretation that we come across. Okay, so the other barrier that we discussed was polarization, and in order to avoid polarization, we need to recognize and that there is a middle ground. Everything may not be on either sides of a continuum. Everything may not be either 1 or 2. You could have 1.1, you could have 1.5. So we need to recognize that most people, most situations in life lie on the middle ground and not on either sides of continuum. The sides of a continuum only help us recognize that there are different categories. But most people are mixtures of the two sides or the two extremes of a continuum. The other way by which we can avoid polarizing people and events and situations are using absolute words for people and events and situations. Is we specify the degree between the extremes. We give a quantitative index wherever possible. We recognize and acknowledge the quantitative difference there is between these two extremes. We use substantive middle terms whenever available. We recognize that if something ranges from good to bad or loyal to disloyal, we can also have some people who are neutral. How do we classify somebody as loyal? How do we classify somebody as disloyal? How do we? So, we need to recognize that there are some people who can be neutral as well. And where do we draw the line between loyal and disloyal? How long that line is when we say disloyal, or we talking about people who go out and speak to media negatively about the organization, or who talk to their colleagues negatively about the organization, or who are actively doing something to sabotage the working of the organization. Are those people qualified as disloyal? And who is qualified? Who is qualified as loyal? People who are constantly saying positive things about the organization, who are constantly coming to their bosses and telling them how great they feel in the organization. So we have this list, and we compare this list, and we say there are some people who may not be coming to the boss and saying how great the organization is, but may not also be sabotaging the organization. They are just coming to the office, doing their work, and going away. So those people are neutral. So that is what we mean by substantively middle terms. Wherever available, people who are, we don't really label these people. Recognize different perceptions as product of different conditionings. We also try and understand that people pursue different things because there have been conditions to believe different things. Okay, so bias and prejudice. We need to remember that no two people's statements or events are identical. Everyone, every situation, every person as we meet in their own respects, we also need to remember that all individuals and organizations are constantly undergoing change. Nothing is frozen, and time of place and the perception you may have had about one person may be different from the perception about another person. Okay, it may not hold true over time and space. Hmm? So some more cures for frozen evaluation. Okay, we need to find out frozen evaluation. When a particular event took place, when a person did something different, we also need to remember again what we said last time, that people and organizations are constantly evolving according to the feedback they receive from their environments. When we talk about snap judgments, we need to consciously give ourselves the opportunity to consider the words and vary evidence before reacting. We need to see things in context, and we need to weigh the evidence. We need to see whatever is going on in its right context before we react. We also need to control our emotions and consider facts before reacting, before jumping to conclusions and assuming that certain things are certain way. And the last one here is misuse of language. We need to remember to focus on the context before assuming any interpretation. Now lot of things, these things some similar, but if you see them separately and if you see them in context, they are really a little bit different from each other. But we are essentially asking you to what I am asking you to do is see things in the right context and view them in the right context before interpreting them in a certain way. Okay, so I will just take a minute more. What I would like you to do before your next class is about before your next class is think about and map the physical, psychological and semantic barriers you personally face in your interactions with people, especially those who are from a different culture or mindset. I also want you to identify your own biases in your interpretations of what people say to you. I had you do this earlier. I would like you to do this again. And I want you to make a list of the strategies you use for overcoming these barriers and biases and discuss these experiences in your class and then come prepared for the next lecture. Okay, thank you.